The catalyst behind Operation Protective Edge this summer was the killing of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank, which led to Israeli officials vowing retaliation against Hamas. And in the days following the discovery of their bodies, 16-year-old Mohammed Abu Kheidr was kidnapped and burned alive by a group of radical Jewish settlers looking for revenge. This brutal murder sparked protests demanding justice for Mohammed and his family. It was during one of those demonstrations that Mohammed's cousin, 15-year-old Tarek Abu Kheidr, was arrested and viciously beaten by Israeli police. Little did they know that at the time, Tarek was an American citizen and that the video of his attack would go viral. So to discuss these events as well as the quest for justice in both cases, I was joined earlier by Tarek Abu Kheidr himself, as well as his mother Suha and their lawyer Hassan Shibli. I first asked Tarek to describe the events that surrounded his cousin's death.
Earlier that day, at around 4 in the morning, I was actually driving by and I saw him sitting down in front of his house by himself, just laying down, like sitting down on the steps. I drove by and I said hi, and I was on the way to get some food. I went to the bakery to get some food. I came back and then I found the cops there at the same place that where he was sitting, and that made me think that something bad happened, maybe to Mohammed. So I went up, and a couple of people were there, not much, maybe 3 or 4 people were there from my village, and I asked what happened, and then right away they told me that Mohammed was kidnapped. And then, well, at that point I thought that something was really bad was gonna happen to him, and I really hope that it didn't, but it was too late.
Heart-wrenching, and our condolences go out to your family for Mohammed's tragic death. Of course, after the news spread that there were protests, to which the Israeli police responded very heavy-handedly, which brings me to what happened to you. Tarek, describe the events that led to your arrest and beating.
It was so frightening that I actually saw people get shot right in front of me with rubber-coated metal bullets, and it's inhumane to see that, because how could that happen? Like, so many things were going through my mind. Like, is my cousin, like, I couldn't believe my cousin actually was murdered. I thought he was still there with us. Like, I felt like he never left, but it was hard to bear with. And I was on the side until I heard soldiers running from behind me, and I thought they were just gonna go run past me until they began to run after me. And that's when I panicked and began to run. That's when I jumped the fence on my left, and that's when they grabbed me and slammed me onto the floor. And they began to beat me until I was unconscious, and even when I went unconscious, they began to kick me and punch me continuously.
Well, to clarify the facts that happened, so Tarek is on the side, he's watching this protest unfold. The reason the people are protesting is because for days, Israeli civilians had been threatening the Palestinian youth in that community. In fact, they had tried to kidnap youth several times repeatedly, and the Israeli police weren't doing anything. In fact, when the Palestinians were asking the Israeli police for protection, the Israeli police would mock them. Even after Tarek's cousin was abducted and people found out that he was killed, the Israeli police said, you know what, they've killed one of you, and now we need to get 300 more for those 3 Israeli teenagers that were brutally attacked earlier. So the police were instigating the situation, and Tarek was watching the protests from the side. He sees kids running towards him, he sees soldiers running behind them, and when he sees the kids running, he gets freaked out, scared, and that's when he starts running. He tries to jump a wall to get away from those Israeli officers, and that's when they grab him, slam him in the ground, tie his hands, and knock him unconscious.
Why do you think that you were targeted, Tarek?
Because all Palestinians are targeted. All Palestinians are being beaten every day and being tortured every day and being taken into custody without any charges filed every single day. And in fact, actually, yesterday, one of my cousins just recently got out of jail from being arrested the day after I came back from Palestine, and he was arrested and then let go. And then just yesterday, he was arrested again with my other cousin. And they're both taken to jail, and they're still in jail as we speak.
Why do you think that your congresswoman in Florida did not immediately call for Tarek to be returned to the U.S.? And what was your reaction to other representatives accusing him of being part of the demonstrations as though somehow that justified this horrific beating?
My office had direct interaction with the Congresswoman's office, and it was very clear she was almost afraid to get involved. It seemed like she was more concerned about the interests of those Israeli police officers involved in the beating of Tarek, more than she was concerned about her own constituent who was beaten by those Israeli police officers. She failed to respond adequately in time to our repeated requests. In fact, what's really interesting is during that week she had time to send out a statement calling for people to save the manatees of Florida, but she didn't have time to issue a public statement demanding the safe, immediate return of Tarek and that those officers be brought to justice. Meanwhile, other congressmen and even the president himself very publicly demanded that Tarek return home safely, and yet his congresswoman didn't fail to do so. In fact, when we met with the State Department in Washington, D.C., they told us, that Congresswoman Kathy Kessler was extremely unhelpful in this whole ordeal, and that's a big shame. She needs to put the interests of her own constituents above the interests of Israeli police officers.
And I just want justice for what the Israeli police did to me, and I don't want it happening to any other person, or especially another child.
Right. I mean, a 2012 report by Breaking the Silence found that Israeli forces maintain very little restraint in dealing with Palestinian children, specifically, according to one testimony of a soldier describing how they actually break up protests. He said people are made to fall on the ground, soldiers with the clubs go over to beat them. A slow runner was beaten. That was the rule. I'm wondering, Hassan, considering how territories are policed like this on a daily basis, do you think that the world would even know about Tarek's beating if he wasn't an American citizen?
No, because, look, there were 2,000 Palestinian civilians brutally killed by Israel over the past couple months in its onslaught on Gaza. And many Americans don't know the names of those Palestinian civilians who were brutally killed. There are many children right now who were beaten by Israeli police and are still in prison. In fact, many of Tarek's cousins right now have been brutally attacked by Israeli police and are in jail right now without facing any charges. And that's all made possible by our tax dollars. And yet we don't know their names, we don't know their stories. And the fact of the matter is that's because they're not American. And it's also because we were very fortunate in this case that at least there was video evidence of the beating Tarek received to expose to the world the great injustice that the Palestinian people are dealt with on a normal daily basis at the hands of the Israeli police.
And Suha, your family was fortunate enough to return to the U.S. Just before Israel's ground invasion of Gaza. But what happened to your family and their homes after you left?
Yes, their homes were raided. The males in the home were taken into custody, again, with no charges. It was just devastating. It was devastating to hear all this, after we had left. They apparently took it as a form of retaliation, I guess, against Tarek, since, he got the word out and, his video went viral. So I guess the Israeli police, wanted to retaliate and take them into custody.
The State Department's been on record saying they're very concerned about the Israeli government and the Israeli police in particular retaliating against the Kheidr family, and that's just unacceptable.
97% of complaints against Israeli forces are never acted upon, according to Yesh Din. And do you think that the facilitation of this indictment was just because of the backlash? There were other officers beating him. What's happening to them?
Well, that's what we're wondering. We're wondering why one officer is being prosecuted and the rest are let go. Not only the other two that were with him in the video, the other ones also that when he got to the jail, he was denied medical attention as well from the officers in the jail.
Yeah, Tarek, what happened to you once you were actually arrested after being severely beaten?
Only after 6 hours of being in jail blindfolded, they finally took me to get some medical attention, and I went to the hospital after 6 hours being in jail and then came back from the hospital the same night that I was beaten.
Yeah, they waited 6 hours after his father had followed him to the jail and pleaded for them to take him to get medical attention.
Suha, what would accountability look like to your family, of course, not only for this beating, for the death of Mohammed?
I think these people, the Israeli extremists that caused the death of Mohammed, should be brought to justice. I mean, this is like a normal thing for the Israeli police to have them off on an insanity plea. So, I mean, I think they should have given them time, sentenced them.
It's very important that the individuals involved in the murder of Tariq's cousin, Mohammed Kheidr, are brought to justice. And it's very important that all the officers involved in brutally attacking Tariq, beating him unconscious, and then denying him medical treatment are brought to justice in a transparent process to send a message that this kind of behavior isn't tolerated by the Israeli government. Because otherwise, you know, the fact that you only have one Israeli officer right now charged with any crime really sends a message that they're almost trying to scapegoat that one officer and try to appease the public that, look, we're doing something, without really addressing the root cause of the problem, which is that there's a system in the Israeli government that tolerates the gross abuse and civil rights violations of the Palestinian people. I mean, it's just unconscionable to think that a country that calls itself a democracy, calls itself an ally of the United States, routinely beats young Palestinian children and throws them in jail without any charges. That's just unconscionable and unacceptable, and that's why it's critical that all the officers involved be brought to justice and Israel changes how it deals with the Palestinian people. We really have to look at the sort of statements made by many Israeli lawmakers that dehumanize the Palestinian people, and that's the problem. The Palestinian people are systematically being dehumanized, and that's what's allowing these officers to beat a child. I mean, how else can you beat a child unconscious unless you don't view him as equal to you, unless you don't view him as a human being? And that's the problem here. I believe that the Palestinian people are facing this sort of mistreatment at the hands of the Israeli government simply because they share a different ethnicity and a different religion than those in power in Israel have. And it's because of that that they're treated as second-class citizens and denied very basic human rights and due process of law.
What's next for the case? What can we do to help get justice for this family?
Well, one, it's very important that the media continues to expose the great injustice that has happened to the Palestinian people on a daily basis. Because had it not been for the media's exposure of what happened to Tariq, he may still be in jail today.
And Tariq, as an American citizen and as someone who is also Palestinian and who has been over there, has seen the atrocities firsthand, who was a victim of them, do you have any message for the American people? I mean, we are paying $3.5 billion a year to kind of sponsor this entire situation.
I just want the people, everyone to spread awareness and show the brutality of the Israeli soldiers to the Palestinians, because me, myself, I want to go back to Palestine so bad because I don't want to abandon my family over there, because that's where my family is and that's where we come from. And that's why I want to go back so bad, because it feels like a different place for me, and I feel a specific way when I go over there.
And it's very important we get justice in Tariq's case, not just for the sake of Tariq and his family, but to send a clear message that that kind of abuse of power and authority is unacceptable, so that no other child, whether he's Palestinian, Jewish, Christian, Israeli, Arab, whatever he is or she is, never goes through that same sort of brutal treatment that Tariq went through. Exactly.
We're all one human family, and it's about time we start treating each other like that. Thank you so much, you guys. Amazing to have you all on. Hassan Shibli, Tariq, Suha Abu Kheidr. Really appreciate it, you guys.
Sitting, and that made me think that something bad happened, maybe to Mohammed. So I went up, and a couple of people were there, not much, maybe 3 or 4 people were there from my village, and I asked what happened, and then they driving by, and I saw him sitting down in front of his house by himself, just laying down, like sitting down on the steps. I drove by and I said hi, and I was on the way to get some food. I went to the bakery to get some food. I came back, and then I found the cops there at the same place that where he was.
So to discuss these events as well as the quest for justice in both cases, I was joined earlier by Tariq Abu Kheidr himself, as well as his mother Suha and their lawyer Hassan Shibli. I first asked Tariq to describe the events that surrounded his cousin's death.
Earlier that day, at around 4 in the morning, I was actually...
This brutal murder sparked protests demanding justice for Mohammed and his family. It was during one of those demonstrations that Mohammed's cousin, 15-year-old Tariq Abu Kheidr, was arrested and viciously beaten by Israeli police. Little did they know that at the time, Tarek was an American citizen and that the video of his attack would go viral. The catalyst behind Operation Protective Edge this summer was the killing of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank, which led to Israeli officials vowing retaliation against Hamas. And in the days following the discovery of their bodies, 16-year-old Mohammed Abu Kheidr was kidnapped and burned alive by a group of radical Jewish settlers looking for revenge.